When it comes to homebrew, the first assumption I think a lot of people make is the fact that it's too difficult or hard. But like honestly, what you can do to make it really easy is just hello and welcome to the Tabletop Podcast. My name is Frank. I have been DMing for far too long, and with me is
Charles, and I've been doing this for far too short.
You want me to make a short joke, don't you? I'm above that, Charles. And so what are we talking about today?
How to replace your co-star.
Ooh, unfortunately, that is not today's topic. Today's topic is homebrewing.
I'm wrong about everything, I guess.
Oh, man. Yeah, so let's talk about homebrew. Charles, in your humble short time of being a GM experience.
Continue.
Well, what is homebrew to you, sir?
Homebrew to me is basically taking the elements of the game that you're playing and then flavoring it with your own style, with your own elements, like, you know, when it comes to character creation or world building, any of that kind of stuff. Homebrewing is just basically adding your spin to an already existing system.
Yeah, you're taking what you know, and then you're getting rid of the bits that you don't like. We talked about that several times already on these episodes, where it's like, if you don't like that part, don't use it. If you do like that part, use it more. Change things, rearrange things, whatever you want to do. And so we're going to talk about homebrewing. We're going to talk about how to do it, why you should do it, all these fun things. But before you do that, you should subscribe so we can hit all of the views, all of the people, all of the things.
All of the time.
Every time. So what's our first question, Charles?
All right, our first question is, so why should we bother homebrewing?
Homebrewing, I think, is like everyone's first step into game design. Is you take the thing that already exists and you tweak it a little bit, and now you have your own thing, right? I think a lot of writers will do that with storytelling. They'll take a plot they already know and then change it a little bit, and now it's a brand new thing. So why not with game design do the same thing? Because here's the thing. A lot of your favorite systems are an example of people homebrewing and then just turning it into their own system. My favorite example is that of Pathfinder. You have the guys who made 3.5. They were enjoying making 3.5. And then Wizards of the Coast were like, no, we're going to make 4th edition D&D. And we're going to completely change it completely. And we're going to get rid of all you guys. And they're like, well, we don't like that. Let's go start our own studio and just make 3.5 again. And so they made Pathfinder. And then they learned from Pathfinder and made Pathfinder 2e, which I actually think is a very good system. Pathfinder 1 was very too crunchy, in my opinion. It did feel just like 3.5.2, 2.0. And Pathfinder 2e, and especially like the remastered version that they're doing, fixes so many problems that I had with it that it's still a crunchy game, but like it's so much more streamlined. And so that's the beauty of homebrewing, is that you get accustomed to those things and you can fix the problems that come up, because every RPG has problems. All of them, even the ones you love.
Especially the ones you love.
Except the ones I love. Mine are perfect. Yours need work.
Right. So, yeah, and just and to add on to that, if you look at all the different tabletop games that are coming out, that have come out, if there's not a system already for it, they build onto it. I mean, essentially, like what Frank had said, it's game design with homebrewing. It's usually more specific, and it's really nice too, because I feel like it really makes your experience more unique, and more specific to your like campaign, your group, whatever. It's a lot of fun to homebrew, especially if you're the creative type.
It also gives a lot of your players, especially if you're homebrewing something for them, it makes them feel like they're heard.
Yes.
Right. They're going to have a lot more enjoyment because it's something that they helped create, and a lot of fun that way. The downside to homebrewing. Oh, yeah, that's right. There's a downside.
Definitely a downside.
Is if you're not used to it, or if you have people who have not necessarily malicious intent, but don't understand how balancing works, you're going to not have a fun time. No one enjoys playing with a group where one person does everything perfectly and everyone else just kind of sits in the background and does nothing. Yeah. Like, there's not a lot of fun in that. At that point, you're just playing 1v1 D&D and or whatever RPG you're playing, and it's not that fun. So the downside of homebrewing is it takes a while to know how to build things that feel balanced, that feel like they fit in the original design without it either being underpowered or overpowered. And let's be honest, it's almost all the time overpowered.
Yeah, and there are levels of homebrewing too, like, homebrewing a new like weapon. Not too crazy. But when you start homebrewing like new mechanics and stuff like that, that's when you get into like some really tough areas too, because you got to make sure that mechanic works with what's already that you're already using, or you have to throw certain things out. So,
and that's the thing too, is that if you start getting to a point where you are just modifying things, like the original
game,
right? The original system is gone, and like you're just doing a new thing, which again might not be a bad thing, but if it's like, oh, I'm now going to take this and go somewhere else. It could be hard to sell that to people.
Yeah.
So,
and do your best not to like homebrew in the middle of a campaign type stuff, unless it's like something minor. You don't want to change the game on your players unless it's a specific system. Like I know something that you had done with our campaign, our D&D campaign. You had brought another system in for ship battles, which worked better, which was really cool. I loved it. I'm like, this is super cool. This is a great way to do this kind of battle with it. So
I used basically a supplement from the MCMD, so that's Matt Colville's group, where he does like war terrain, and you like roll dice to determine like if your army or battalion gets hit by another one, and like whether you do damage to them. And we did that as like a naval combat, because it's the same kind of thing. You're just on water, and right, in a sense, I am taking someone's homebrew and homebrewing it.
And that's the beautiful thing about homebrewing. It's just there are so many benefits. Again, there are a lot of benefits to it, but again, I think it's always important as GM and players to discuss these things before they're implemented. Because Frank had mentioned this to us prior to this this interaction. He didn't just like, hey, we're gonna do it this way this time. He was like, hey, by the way, I have an idea how to do the ship battle, so we will be having that coming up in the next week or two, and then again, just. It's a good idea not to just spring stuff on people. But homebrew can be a lot of fun. It can be a really interesting, but you do want to be cautious of who you're playing with and what the intentions are. And again, overall, the goal is to have fun with these games. And if that's what your homebrew does, mission accomplished.
Obviously, playtesting is important, and also like letting people know that their playtesting is also important.
Yeah.
Even if it's at the end, that's fine. But like at some point, they should probably know. So
yeah, it's always good to keep your players in the loop.
It's also important to know, like, you can homebrew everything. You're going to find a lot of homebrewing advice on specifically 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, because that's where, like, most of the content is. But you can homebrew other systems. I think before you even start to do that, though, you should understand the system you're homebrewing.
Correct.
Right? So if I start playing City of Mist, for example, if we just start doing that, and I'm like, I've read the rules. I think that this system, the tag system that they use, where it's like if certain elements are added in, you can add a tag to that, and then that gives you an additional +1 to your roll.
Yeah.
I don't like that. That's too complicated. We're going to completely get rid of it, and I'm going to add in this new FLRP system that I came up with, and it's an acronym, obviously, that stands for whatever. Be careful, because if you do that without knowing the system, you could be taking out what is actually an integral part of it. If you take out an integral part of the system and change it, like, it's going to cause the system to kind of collapse in on itself. The tag system in City of Mist is almost 100% necessary, and it facilitates a lot of like creative gameplay in the City of Mist game. But things you can change, such as the like choosing an action and like what kind of thing you can do, especially considering they're making a new version, like new City of Mist games basically, and all of those change that. Like, that's a good step to know, like, if the game designers are changing certain things, then that means that's something you can change as well without destroying what's integral to the game itself.
Well, yeah, like we were playing D&D 5e, and we were hearing about all the new things that were coming across for was it D&D 1, what they were calling
yes.
it?
Or no, yeah.
Was it 1? Yeah, I don't remember what it was being
One
called.
D&D.
Yeah. So, and there were things like we were talking about, like, oh, these are some elements we could incorporate into. Because, yeah, as they're changing it, I don't think there's any harm in incorporating that into your game unless, your players have a major issue with it. Again, communication's key when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so knowing your system well. For example, I had a homebrew system in 5th edition that was like the hero point system.
Yes.
Which allowed you to re-roll a die, which allowed you to add things to a scene, which allowed you to get a natural 20 if needed.
Success, yeah.
Right. Now, that works for 5th edition because I replaced like what was normally inspiration, because we usually had bards.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why give the bard thing to everybody when I can just make my own system.
Yep.
And it worked out pretty well. But then if let's say I go to the Star Wars RPG system, it's not going to work as well because there is already mechanics in place for some of that stuff, right? Like spending hero points to add something to a scene doesn't matter when you can spend a destiny point to add something to the scene. And now it's like, cool, I get to keep these for something else, right? Like the game balance doesn't work in that sense. And so I haven't homebrewed the Star Wars system because we're still learning it. We're still seeing like what works and what doesn't. Again, as of now, I don't think there's anything that I want to change.
Yeah.
There's maybe a few things I would streamline, but even then, like I think it's a good system.
Well, and like you said, like really knowing your system is important because again, without we've talked about me doing the Fallout tabletop role playing game. I definitely homebrewed some stuff. I created a new creature. I changed the location because the Fallout tabletop kind of focuses on the Boston, like the Fallout 4 video game. It kind of takes after that. But I was like, you know what? I want my players to be more familiar with it. So I brought it into our home state and our home area, which is like Central Florida area. So, to kind of make it more relatable, things they could recognize, to bring the players in to kind of really to get the immersion into the with the players.
When it comes to homebrew, the first assumption I think a lot of people make is the fact that it's too difficult or hard. But like honestly, what you can do to make it really easy is just flavor some stuff, is just change what it looks like. So for example, Charles was talking about like taking a creature that was predominantly in Boston and putting it in Florida. Well, like a Boston seagull in Florida might not work as well, or like whatever, like the Mothman in Fallout 76 isn't going to necessarily work in California. But what you can do is you can reflavor stuff.
Absolutely.
So you keep the stats the same and then just change the flavor of it a little bit. So now it's not the Wise Mothman, it's the Buzzard King or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like those are the easy things to change, Again, like if you're going to change the system, again, know your system. But changing just like something for flavor's sake of it, that's again just a little bit of creativity and a little bit of time.
Right.
I made a creature. It was basically like a blood bug, but I changed it. I can't remember what I called it. I called it something else. And I made it more specific to the location and statted it out, but basically it played the same way as the blood bug would play, but it made it more familiar to the area that we're in.
Yeah. So that would be my first bit of advice is if you can just reflavor something that already exists in the RPG, do that. Oh, yeah. Because that's going to be so much easier than coming up with custom mechanics that work. Yes. Sure. But let's say you actually have to come up with mechanics on your own. Well, how do you do that? One, like we said, know the system. Two, make the change. And when you're making the change, understand how it's going to impact it before you even do anything, right? So if, let's say we're talking about Vampire the Masquerade. Okay. And I want to play a werewolf. I am aware that there are werewolves in the other versions of that system. We're not talking about that right now. Let's assume that doesn't exist or they don't know about it. Let's say I want to play a werewolf. Right.
I want to play a werewolf.
But we're playing vampires. Okay, let's see what we can do. Well, I can't.
But I really want to be Jacob.
You really want to be Jacob in this Twilight thing. We can't just reflavor it because there's mechanics that are specific to vampires. Like werewolves don't eat or don't drink blood in order to stay werewolves. That doesn't really work. So now you have to change the hunger system. What is it that's going to cause a werewolf to, in a sense, frenzy? And stuff like that. And so now that's something you have to think about. How do I change what is an integral part of vampire, which is the hunger mechanic of like, if you're not careful, the beast that is your vampire self will take control and start doing things you don't want to do. Thematically, it works, right? You can keep that system because like a werewolf going out of control is the same as a vampire.
Almost like a Hulk type situation, like an anger issue, yeah.
But like, how that happens or like what you have to do to satiate that is going to be different, and it might look even different mechanically speaking. So like where a vampire needs to find someone to feed on or find a way to get blood, maybe a werewolf has to have a special amulet or like some sort of thing that has to be refueled by doing.
They have to do hot yoga.
They have to do specifically hot yoga. Why not? They have to be shirtless in the woods for a certain amount of time. They can't swear. Let's just get all the werewolf references. Anything else? Swearwolves. We're werewolves, not swearwolves. Have you not seen Have you not seen What We Do in the Shadows, the movie?
I have not seen the movie. I want to watch it. I've watched some of the show. The show is great.
Show is great.
But like, yes, I
it's very
do
good.
definitely want to see the movie. That is on my list of things to watch.
Understanding like what you're gonna have to take out and what you're gonna have to take in, because like the idea of I want robots in my fantasy world is a cool idea. How are you gonna make that mechanically fit if part of what's important is like the like life force energy, right? How does a robot doesn't have life force? So now how does that work? Or is it something we're gonna have to reflavor, or do I have to come up with brand new mechanics where like maybe it has unlimited life force? The downside is it has to steal it from another life, right? These are things you got to think about before you even start making the rules in the first place. What am I even adding on in the first place?
Because there are times you can homebrew something and it completely backfire on you, and like you don't want to go into a game or a campaign with this new mechanic or this new thing that you can't adjust.
Right.
It's gonna make, because again, then you're gonna have to stop playing the game. It breaks the immersion, and that's why you play. It's to be immersed into into these worlds. So you want to make sure you really understand that whatever you come up with works with what's already there.
So then let's say you've figured it out. Or let's say you've come up with the mechanic, you know what you're going to want to do.
I'm a werewolf now.
You're a werewolf now.
Name Jacob.
Sure. Let's say you've figured out exactly what you're going to want to do. You've written the mechanics, right? We're not going to necessarily go into that because that's more like a per detail thing.
Yep.
Don't get mad at me for making the short joke then.
I'm just having fun.
I can tell. The next thing you're going to want to do is use it in your game.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. If it's a monster or something that like the players are going to have to go against, I'm personally of the opinion you don't have to tell them, but be ready in the middle of combat to possibly change some things. If it looks like this homebrewed creation that you just made is wrecking shop, and it's like the players have barely put a dent in it, they're about to die, maybe you might want to think off the top of your head, okay, where's the off switch on this thing? How can they instantly defeat it so that way it doesn't feel bad?
I saw a reel or something the other day where it was the players were like, I do this much damage, and the GM's like, oh yeah, and adds like a 1 in front of the so it makes, instead of being like 78, it's 178. It's like, oh, you did 87 damage, my creature's still up,
right?
And that's what, and I don't blame GMs for doing stuff like that, because you don't want to ruin the combat experience for. And again, some of you guys might disagree with me. That's fine. I don't want to ruin a combat experience for a player, or have it ruined for me. I'd rather take longer to take something down, and have it feel like it was worth fighting than just like I cast this or I do this and just have it just crumple. That's that's a BBEG problem sometimes too. But yeah.
In my first ever D&D like full campaign at college, I wanted them to fight a beholder because I was like, wow, beholders are awesome. Oh, they're this high level, but my players are only like third or fourth. I want them to fight it now. So I'm like, okay, I'll just make it weaker. And so like I did all these things to make it weaker, including lowering its hit points. But like by the end of the second round, it was going to die. So I give it like 25 more hit points. That 25 more hit points made it last 5 more rounds, right?
A little goes a long way.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, like being prepared to make tweaks as you're playing it is okay.
Oh yeah.
And here's the thing. No one's going to bother you. You're not recording this, putting this on the internet.
If you are, who cares?
Right. Like you can just say it's a homebrewed creation and then never have to post the stats because you don't need to.
Yep.
Honestly, when I run combat, most of the things I just make it up in my head. I'm like, these are the main things I have. I have those written down. And a lot of other things I'm like, oh, this is a niche thing. Let me figure it out in the moment.
As someone who's been a player in his campaigns, it feels that way.
We're going to take that as a compliment.
It wasn't an insult, so
it wasn't an insult.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So again, if you're making something against your players, just be prepared to tweak it in the middle of using that thing. If it's a mechanic that's like affects gameplay rather than a monster that you've created, again, be prepared to make the change immediately. If you realize, oh man, when my players collect a bunch of victory points and then they cash it in, they can actually gain more victory points and then cash those in, and like it becomes a like infinite well. Being able to then say, hey, you can only ever get 5 at a time. Like even if it's just a band-aid right now, like being able to say right now, I'm just going to say you can only get 5 per round of combat or whatever.
Yeah, setting those boundaries is for sure, because you don't want to set up something where it's like you've broken the system by homebrewing. So
yeah, and in those situations too, you should probably say it's homebrew out the gate. Like, hey guys, we're gonna replace this mechanic with one I came up with. Be prepared for things to change and for me to come up with new things. Always be prepared for that, because again, it's going to take some time. With my hero point system in 5th edition, like I had it where you could just have as many as you wanted, only to realize that there's some players who will use them as much as they can, and there's other players who will just sit on them, and then suddenly they have 30, and I'm like, no, we can't. Yeah. That breaks it. Yeah. That breaks it too much if you can have 30. So I maxed out at 10.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well, where it's like, okay, now you could be getting more every game. You could be getting more every session, but you're choosing instead to hold on to 10.
Right? Me, I was definitely that guy.
And
to be fair, it was my first time playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know, I was still fairly new, so like even to like the homebrew mechanic of having hero points. Towards the end of it, I got better at using them, but I was it took me a while to get used to that.
Right, but that's fine. That's a player like philosophy. You wanted to hold on to them until the moment that was necessary. And that's fine. Because then it becomes an interesting choice. Yeah. But before then, it was like, oh no, Charles could just get 25, and then he's able to do 3 different. Yeah. I also had a version where it was like you could just use them as much as you wanted, and I quickly thought, I'm like, oh no, wait, that means this person could have 10 points saved up and then take 10 actions on their turn and do whatever the heck they want. And now that's not fun for me. That's not fun for the fellow players. So I made it to where it was once per combat, you can use a hero point. That's it. Yeah. So when you use it wisely.
Yeah, but you also did you adjust it later to where if you roll the nat 1 and the nat 20?
Yeah, we added the system where it's like
he homebrewed his homebrew, which was really cool, because like this was something he did later. And again, he talked to us about it first.
Right. Now, let's say you're homebrewing something for a player. Here's the thing you want to say. 1, tell that player everything is subject to change. 2, tell the party everything is subject to change, and also tell them up front this player is playing something that is homebrewed. 3, play test the crap out of it, because here's the thing. Especially if your player comes up to you and is like, I made this, they will have made it too strong. They will have given themselves a plus 20 on every roll ever, even though your system doesn't have pluses. Your system doesn't do a plus system. In fact, 17 is maybe the highest you ever get, and somehow they're rolling plus 20. That seems unfair, right? Yeah. That's something you always got to keep track, is like, give it an initial read through, see what needs to change. And if they're not willing to change it, just be like, okay, then we're not going to do it.
Pick something else.
Right. Keeping that communication, but always being willing to be like, okay, we're going to try this out. And then as you're playing, seeing, oh, this is broken with this, so we're going to have to change that. Oh, this doesn't work the way we thought it was. It should be this.
Yeah. Nerf what you need to nerf, improve what you need to improve.
Right. And that can happen a lot, especially if someone's like finds a homebrewed system, finds a homebrewed character concept, and they're like, oh, this was really cool off of like another website, therefore I should be able to use it. And then you read it and you're like, no, it says you win. This isn't a game that you win. How do you win? Explain that to me.
How do you win your tabletop games?
Right. And so that's the thing, is like, you got to be careful about all of that in regards to homebrewing, for sure.
So in your experience as a GM, DM, how has homebrew impacted like your campaigns and like how you operate in your as a GM?
Yeah, I have found that I am more reluctant to homebrew like character concepts that are like, so like for 5th edition, anything that was like a custom class, I was almost like, no, because you would either be too strong or too weak, honestly. Like they wouldn't be
fair.
They wouldn't be as good as we wanted, in the sense of being fun, or too broken. I think there was one where like Jeffrey brought to me a homebrew class, and we started playing it, and I was like, ooh, that's actually too strong. We're gonna have to nerf that. And he's like, well, then I don't want to play it, because like that was the reason I wanted to play it, was how strong this thing was. And I'm like, okay, I am sorry then that I like, because I had given them that permission, and now suddenly I'm taking his fun away. Like I was like, okay, I don't even want to do that anymore. Right. But like subclasses were fine. I didn't mind doing that. Small things here and there are okay. Magic items were always like an easy thing to homebrew, because it's like you come up with a homebrew thing, and then if it doesn't, like if it's working too well, you can always just take it away. Like literally magically, poof, oh no, the villain stole it. Now we got to get my magic sword back. Right? Like that kind of stuff is easy, versus things that like really change the core of the game is a lot harder. So like if we had decided, we're not going to roll a D20 anymore in our D&D system. We're going to roll 3D6 and you take the highest. And if it's a 7 with your modifiers, that means you get an insta-crit. And then, right, like that's where it becomes...
Oh my God, I would hate that so much.
Right, like that's where it's like, just play a different game.
Yeah, so at that point you should be playing Candela or something.
Yeah, just play a different system in general. Probably City of Mist, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't played that one yet. So.
No, not yet. Don't worry. We will. So yeah, ultimately homebrewing is a system of constant checks and balances. And again, most of this, you won't have to do as many checks and balances because you're probably most likely not going to be releasing it to the public. If you release it to the public, you're going to have to do play testing where it's you get players to play it and they come back and they tell you, hey, this is a broken combo, or hey, this is too weak. Hey, this needs to be nerfed. And you're going to have to then sit through all of the data and be like, okay, what is actually good or bad about it? Oh, I actually wanted this to feel bad because that feeds into this mechanic, so on and so forth. That is where game design is like gets into the crunch of it, of like having to constantly look into it more and more. Yeah. So more eyes on something in that regard of publishing it is going to be good. Outside of that, like again, just being open to your play group and being like, I want to try this homebrew thing. Can we try it? And then you like maybe try it for a one shot. It's like, we're going to try it once, see how it works. If it works more, we'll change it. If not, cool, just move on.
And again, as a player, I'm like, if you homebrew something and it breaks the system or breaks the immersion or it breaks anything in the game, that's when I start losing interest in not having fun anymore. If I'm playing with with another player, and that player, the GM has allowed them to bring this homebrew thing, and just they're getting their way all the time, like everything seems going, like everything's coming up that player, and just there's no real struggle. Again, I like to play games for their challenges. I mean, I don't want it to be to the point where it's like I'm like bashing my head against the wall type stuff, but I do want to play it to where it's like there's an element of loss. Like, I could lose this. And if there's someone brings in a homebrew something and it just feels broken, that's when I'll say something. I'm like, hey, I don't think this player should have this.
Right.
I believe that it gives them an unfair advantage. Or if we're going to do this, maybe we need to add some other elements to our other players, something like that. But for the most part, like I said, I think homebrewing is a fun, good way to make your playing your campaign, your game unique.
And also, like, if it already exists, like, use that. For example, Call of Cthulhu is a very fun game. It is, if you are coming from Dungeons and Dragons, like any combat focused RPG, it's going to be hard to make that transition because it's more like investigative and you're very squishy. Like, you're meant to like not be in combat as much as you want to be. I made my character designed to take hits. Like, that was the point of my character in a Call of Cthulhu game I played with Jeffrey. And he took a hit that would have killed anyone else. And that's because I designed him well. And so, like, if you're the kind of person who's like, well, I wish they were, less squishy. Fun fact, there's a thing called Pulp Cthulhu. Buy that book, look at their extra rules, and use them, right? Traveler has that too. Traveler has that too. They have an extra book system that you can buy and use additional books for, right? A lot of these game companies will actually hear what you guys have to say, where it's like, this system doesn't work. I don't like this system. I do like this system. And they'll accumulate that and make changes, right? We talked about Pathfinder with their remaster that's happening. They're changing a lot of issues that people had with classes. And like, that's awesome. So definitely, like, feel free to homebrew, and you might even get like a book out of it where it's like, and there's the thing that you were looking into, right? So always be on the lookout for that stuff.
Yeah, these game developers, for the most part, or most of them, listen to their customers and the people, the people who are their consumers.
I don't know who else we could be talking about. Surely not the sorcerers of the shoreline.
No, not them. I don't know. No, I'm not familiar
no,
with that
they
name.
are very nice and definitely wouldn't pull the rug under from a bunch of people.
Yeah. So, I mean,
They did. That was the joke. They did. Yeah. Speaking of jokes, thank you for watching our episode. Any last things, Charles?
I think you just called our podcast a joke. I'm not sure.
Yes, we are. And we hope that you enjoyed. Please keep watching. Yes. Until next time.
Stay witty.
Yes.
Woo woo.
Woo.
Oh.
No.